Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Get cozy, get yourself a nice drink. I'm currently drinking my new favorite. I just ordered it this morning for the first time and I love it. And it's just a plain decaf iced coffee with oat milk and a coconut shot from Dunkin' Donuts. And it's perfect. Love it so much. And today might be a long one. I'm gonna try not to make it an hour long. I'm talking about something that I feel like is a little divisive maybe on BookTube. I feel like there are plenty of booktubers who talk about this all the time, and a lot also booktubers who never ever talk about these. And today I am going through my classics collection. I'm not going to go into much detail about like why I read classics or why you should read classics or how to start with classics, but I would love to have a video about that if you're interested in it. What I'm really just going through right now are classics that I've read, classics that are on my 2021 TBR, and then classics that I own that I have not yet read. So that's what I'm talking about today. I am going to try to make this as quick and snappy as possible, but I would love to also talk about these in the future in more depth if it's wanted. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about some classics. So I'm gonna start with the classics that I own that I've read. So there are plenty of other classics that I've read that I just don't own, and I'm gonna try to go through them in the order in which I read them loosely. So I'm gonna start with the books that I had to read for middle school required reading. I only own 3. There are some, well no, technically I read The Giver. Would you call that a classic? I wouldn't. I don't know. Just to name a few classics that I had to read in middle school that I don't own. Watership Down, A Midsummer's Night Dream, Taming of the Shrew. There are plenty more, but I can't think of them. Let's get into the books that I did read when I was in middle school. I think this was summer reading for middle school, and I don't remember which year, but this is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, and I also reread this, and I would give this book 5 stars. Another book that I read in middle school was Animal Farm by George Orwell. I hated this book, and at the time of reading I would have given it 1 star. I haven't read it since middle school, and I don't know how I would rate it now, but we'll see. One day I'll maybe reread it. And then another book that I read in middle school was A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I don't remember a single thing about this book. I remember though that I had to, I listened to the audiobook while I was reading because I just couldn't get into it, but I am interested in trying it again just to, you know, we'll see what happens. And if I had to rate this, I would give it 3 stars. So next we have books that I read in high school. Again, these are not all of I read a ton, let me tell you, a ton of books for required reading in high school. And these are just the ones that I own. Let's try to keep this in order as well. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. It's probably, I don't want to say it's my favorite classic. I don't like to choose favorites, but it's definitely up there as one of my favorites. And I've also reread this recently. I would give this 5 stars. I really love this book. I also really love this edition. I love the cover. And I read this in the 9th grade. Loosely, I know I read this when I was in high school. I don't know. No. Fences by August Wilson. This is a play. And I want to say I either read this in the 9th grade or the 10th grade. And if I had to rate it, I read it recently again, and I don't remember what I rated it, but off the top of my head, I want to say 3 stars. Another book that was not technically required reading for me because I was in, like, honors and AP classes, but my teacher was like, well, it's a good book, so if you read it, I'll give you extra credit. So I read Night by Elie Wiesel, and I would give this book 5 stars. I've read it multiple times. It's very good, and I highly recommend it. And then 2 books that I read as a senior in high school. The first one, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I would give this book 5 stars. I really loved reading this. I am really interested in rereading it because I don't remember a lot of like the specific plot, although I know overall what happens. And then one book that I don't even know why I still own this book, but I read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley when I was going into my senior year of high school, and I hated this book. I hear a lot of booktubers lately talk about this book saying that they thought it was really good, blah blah blah, but I really hated reading this. Probably also because I thought it was very weird, like uncomfortably weird. I honestly don't remember much about it besides being very uncomfortable reading it, which, I mean, it's a dystopian novel, so I mean, you know, he succeeded. But yeah, so if I had to rate this now, I'd probably give it 2 stars. So those are the books that I own that I read in high school. When I was in college, I unfortunately was not able to get an English degree like I wanted because long story, I'm not going to go into that. But, so I didn't read a ton of literature when I was in college, like classic literature. I took one English class in college that was American Lit because all of my other classes were covered by AP classes that I took in high school, which is why I read a ton in high school. But the only book that I own that I read while I was in college, it was not assigned reading. This was probably the first classic that I read that was not assigned reading, and that was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I really enjoyed reading this at the time. I don't know how I would rate it now. I would want to say 4 stars maybe. I don't remember a lot about it. I think the most the specific memories I have about this book are about the adaptation with Leo DiCaprio, and I hated that. Not Leo DiCaprio. I hated the movie. But anyway, I'm gonna say 4 stars. And then the rest of these books I've kind of read on my own in random situations. Let's see how I want to organize these. Let's try to go in order, okay? I think then I would have read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I don't know if you want to consider this a classic. It's more of like a modern classic. I don't really remember, again, a lot of specific plot details because it's been a couple of years and I would like to reread it eventually. I think I'd probably give it 4 stars because I'm not a fan of the writing style. Next up would probably be Persuasion by Jane Austen. This was the first Jane Austen book that I actually read because I follow a lot of Anne Bogle, Modern Mrs. Darcy blog posts and like her Instagram and stuff, and she and I feel like a lot of her subscribers always said that Persuasion was their favorite Jane Austen, and so I thought that would be a great place to start, and it was not. I really didn't like it, but I think that was also because I wasn't really in a classic mindset in that point of my life, so I definitely want to reread this and give it a second chance. I think as it stands, from my previous experience, I would give it 3 stars. Then A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I read this every year for Christmas. I don't remember the first year that I read it, maybe 2017. I mean, I would give it 5 stars. I just think it's a Christmas classic that I'll always love. It's just a nice, easy, Christmassy feel read. The rest of these classics are actually classics that I read pretty recently. I guess the next one would be The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I forgot to mention I also read The Hobbit. I read that when I was in the 5th grade. I would give it 5 stars. It's just in a different pile at the moment, but love that book. And then for my personal book club, we read The Silmarillion. I read half of it. I haven't finished it and I would like to. It's just like super, super dense. And there's a lot of names, and I think this book deserves like in-depth reading. And then, okay, so the rest of these books kind of were in the past year that I read. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Definitely my favorite Jane Austen so far. I loved reading this. I definitely give it 5 stars. I read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, which I would also say is a modern classic. I really enjoyed it. I really loved the storytelling, and I thought that it was a great coming of age story, and I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I've got some beautiful tabs all throughout was The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, and I read this for my workbook club in October, I think? I don't know. It was a few months ago, and I would probably give this book 3 stars. I thought it was very interesting for like in-depth discussion, and I don't think that I would have enjoyed this book as much if I didn't have that discussion with a book club. It's very dense. Well, I wouldn't say it's dense. It's kind of just like, it's very slow, but like on purpose. And that's just not something that I typically enjoy. I did really like the discussion of like, we're not reviewing this, okay? I would give this book, I would say 3 stars. And then end of the year into this year, I read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I would give this book 5 stars. I love it so much. I love this edition. It was a great read. I'm going to reread it. 100% recommend. Next, I have The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I would give this book 3 stars. I think it's very outdated. And then I read Hamlet by Shakespeare last year, and I think I gave this 3 stars. I don't really love Shakespeare. So those are the books that I own, that I've read, my classics. So now we will move on to I'm going to go into my TBR for this year, 2021. So early this year I did film a classics 2021 TBR, and if you're interested in that, I'll put it in the description box. I'm not going to go into any detail about these books. Again, I just kind of want to talk about the books that I own. Currently I am reading Emma by Jane Austen, so this will be my 3rd Jane Austen, and so far loving it. I do have this beautiful collection of J.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit, which I've read, 5 stars, absolutely love it. And then the rest of the Lord of the Rings series. I have not read any of these yet, and I'd really like to. And I think I should make that a goal. Next, I have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I've got a collection of tales by Edgar Allan Poe. This is a Barnes & Noble edition that is just the classic tales of horror. I have, actually I've got 2 copies of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Definitely pay attention to your shelves, know what's on them before you go book shopping. In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, which I would definitely say is more of a modern classic. One classic that probably my biggest, most ambitious goal for the year is to read Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I'm so excited to read this. I'm actually going to be reading it with Emma and Carolyn. They're doing a Dickens versus Tolstoy debate type of book club thing, and I'll try to leave that information in the description, but I think they're reading this in June and July, so that will be hopefully enough time to read this really dense tome. And then the last classic that I have on my TBR for the year is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I bought this last year because I'm just in love with the cover. It's so gorgeous. Forever will be in awe of this cover. Okay, home stretch. We are now into the classics that I own, that I haven't read, and that are not on my TBR for the year, but you never know. You never know. First, I have this really old edition, The Great Short Stories of Robert Louis Stevenson. I got this at a thrift store, and you can actually see where the original owner started writing in, or drawing in the letters, which I think just gives it more character, you know? And this is kind of half read because I have read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I have 1984 by George Orwell. I have like the weirdest editions of these classics. Next, I've got Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. Definitely want to get to this very soon. It's kind of crazy that I haven't read this yet. Jane Austen that I haven't read, Sense and Sensibility. My second copy of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. It has an afterword by J.R. Ward, and if you don't know who that is, she's a like paranormal romance author. So that's really interesting, and that's probably why I'm not going to get rid of this copy. Next, I have The Awakening and selected short fiction by Kate Chopin. I have The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I don't know that I'll actually ever read this, but you never know. I have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I intended to read this last year and I didn't, so still got my bookmark in there. Collection of poetry. It's Poems Bewitched and Haunted. It's from the Everyman's Library Pocket Poets. These books are absolutely adorable. You can pretty much get them in any bookstore, but they don't have like the whole collection. Definitely would recommend though. They're adorable and they have like a little bookmark. This is also for my TBR on this year. I don't know why it's in this stack, but Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Next I have this absolutely gorgeous edition of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I definitely picked this up on a whim because I just love the cover so much. Okay, this is a Barnes & Noble signature classic. Another Jane Austen I haven't read, Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I said that already. I have the most random book, Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Definitely not like the Jules Verne that I'd prefer to read, so I don't even know why I own this book. Will I read it? It's so short. It's less than 200 pages. Read it that. Again, very random. I think I got this at a thrift store and I just thought that it was really interesting. This is The Prince by Machiavelli and it is 65 cents. So, will I ever read this? Probably not, but it's a tiny book, so it's not taking up much space. Another Jane Austen, Northanger Abbey. And yes, I am not bothered by having a gazillion different editions of Jane Austen. I don't care. I have A Haunted House and Other Short Stories by Virginia Woolf. The Complete Sherlock Holmes Volume 1 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is just one of the Barnes & Noble Classics editions. That's like 600 plus pages. Have I read a single one of these since I bought this book? No, but one day soon. I also have The Essential Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. Why would I also own another copy of this in just a different edition? I don't know. Oh, I've got the receipt in here. Let's see when I bought this. August 11th, 2017. I bought these two together because it was like a buy one, get one. And then last, I have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Okay, and I bought this Barnes & Noble Classic, but it was used. And for the first time, I'm looking through this book. There are annotations in it. That's so exciting. Like, in depth. There's like writing and underlining. I'm so excited. And those are my classics, my classic collection. Is it extensive? No, not in any way. Will I read all of these? Probably not. Will I get rid of them at some point when I move out of this house? Probably gonna get rid of half of them. We'll see. Also, I didn't include a lot of books in this list because I don't know, like, what do you consider a modern classic? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm interested in 3 things. You can answer one or you can answer all 3 in the comments. Number 1, what is your favorite classic of all time? If I had to pick, I would say The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. All-time favorite. Number 2, what classic that you read that was required reading did you hate the most? For me, that would be Walden by Henry David Thoreau because it's trash. But only because I read it in high school. I bet you if I read it now, without having read it in high school, I probably would love it. Anyway, and then number 3, what classic are you most intimidated by, but you still want to read? Again, for me, that would be Anna Karenina. Also, I guess A Tale of Two Cities, even though I read it when I was in middle school, I'm so intimidated by that book. But I feel like there's references to it everywhere, so I feel like it's a book that I need to read again so I can remember and know more about it. But anyway, those are my questions. I'll put them in the description again if you don't recall what I said. Again, number 1, your favorite classic of all time or that you can think of today. The classic that was required reading that you hated the most, and or your most intimidated classic that you still want to read. Put it in the comments. Alright, so yeah, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any recommendations for classics or for videos that you would like to see, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you made it to the very last part of this clip, I want you to put a flower emoji with your comment. Alrighty, so I will see you in a new video soon.